In the last episode, the Eastern military competition finally kicked off, also where our boy Lu Sheng became a literal god. Not only did he take down all of the general stars in the district effortlessly, but he managed to take them down in just 4 moves, while also giving Dong Shengyi a little lesson on the side. Meanwhile, the marshal? He was simply blown away. I mean, he just saw an actual god in action. Now let's jump back into the story. It's already the next day and something weird is going on. The Eastern District's daily newspaper barely mentions the competition or Lu Sheng's win. Still, Lu Sheng's name is spreading like wildfire throughout the entire military. Back at his mansion, all he's waiting for now is the final military competition to kick off. That's when the butler strolls in with a fancy box. Turns out, it's Lu Sheng's upgraded weapon, custom-made and shiny with over 90% mithril gold and some other super rare metals thrown in for good measure. Now that's what you call a true level 8 weapon. The butler also gives Lu Sheng the heads up that the competition's starting soon, and the marshal's got a private jet ready for him. But Lu Sheng just waves it off, saying he's got a quick trip home first. He'll just show up a day or 2 early. No biggie. Just as he's about to head out, the maid pops out of nowhere, eager to tag along and serve him. Lu Sheng glances up, locking eyes with the maid. So it's starting, huh? He thought to himself. But instead of pointing it out, he just nodded and agreed. The maid's eyes lit up, and she quickly thanked him. Lu Sheng gave her a curious look, then with a teasing grin asked, why is she thanking him? Shouldn't he be the one saying thanks since she's the one taking care of him? He said this while flashing her with a warm smile. The maid, caught off guard, suddenly looked flustered, her voice shaking a little. Lu Sheng just chuckled to himself and didn't push it further. He told her to get ready and then headed out. By evening, he and Snowy walking hand in hand down a quiet little path. Lu Sheng casually asked her if she wanted to join him on a quick trip home before the competition started. However, Snowy hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. She explained that her family had already heard about how Lu Sheng had destroyed her brother's martial path, so she needed to head home herself. Lu Sheng, ever the gentleman, offered to go with her, but he didn't see it as a bad thing for Dong Shengyi. Sure, the guy's pride was sky high, but he was too easily manipulated back in the cavern, stubbornly chasing what he called the invincible martial path. But here's the problem. His talent and strength just didn't match up to that goal. In Lu Sheng's eyes, even if Dong Shengyi hadn't run into him, he would have met someone even stronger eventually, and that time, it wouldn't just be his pride that got hurt. Rather, it'd be his life taken away. But now, after his martial path was shattered, if he could find a new martial path going forward, there might still be hope for him. Lu Sheng had seen Dong Shengyi's future in the dream world. He knew the guy would never become a martial saint, so everything he said to Snowy was genuine. Snowy thought about what Lu Sheng said, but in the end, she didn't fully get it. Still, she promised to pass the message on to her brother. Lu Sheng gave a slight nod, then suddenly remembered something else. Scratching the back of his head a bit awkwardly, he said, by the way, there's a good chance he will run into her other brother, Dong Poqian. He wants Snowy to maybe give him a heads up. He'd hate for him to end up like Dong Shengyi. Snowy instinctively wanted to say how strong her oldest brother really was, but when she remembered Lu Sheng's strength, she just nodded while saying she would talk to him. The two walked a bit further before sharing a quick hug. The next day, Lu Sheng hopped on the high-speed train back home. By this point, his name had spread far and wide, and the train attendants were all smiles, greeting him every time they walked past him. Every few minutes, one of them would bounce over, asking if he needed anything. Afterward, they gathered together and talked about him. They couldn't believe this young, handsome guy was the top general they were assigned to serve. It was like something straight out of a comic book. As they gossiped among themselves, one of them gushed, saying all of the top-tier hotties were in the military, and she even knew this train route was set up just for him. Lu Sheng, hearing all the chatter, casually called over the maid traveling with him and asked for a fresh cup of tea. The maid took his cup and headed into the next carriage. As she turned her back to Lu Sheng, her expression changed, and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead, her face twisted into a sinister smile. Before bringing the tea back, she let a drop of something suspicious slip into the cup. What could she be up to? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself before returning to Lu Sheng's carriage, tea in hand. Calmly, she handed the cup over. Lu Sheng didn't even glance up, still scrolling through his phone, telling her to just leave it there for now. He continued browsing, checking out recent messages, one from Healing Su, who's hopefully our boy's second future waifu. She brought up something about the Chen family stirring up some trouble again. He thought for a moment, thinking he should make some time to go and help her out. Then there was an update from his sister, proudly sharing her progress. Lu Sheng raised an eyebrow. Still not even at level 4? He couldn't help but wonder how she managed to sleep at night with such slow progress. He decided to up her training by 5 times when he got back. He kept scrolling through his messages and checked his feed, getting lost in the endless posts. Time passed, and Lu Sheng didn't seem the least bit interested in the tea sitting by his side. Suddenly, the maid stood up, nervously pointing out that the tea was going to get cold. Lu Sheng slowly looked up, smiling while pointed out that she never rushed him to drink tea before. Panicking a little, the maid quickly responded, explaining that she knew that he doesn't like drinking cold teas. So that's how it is. Lu Sheng nodded thoughtfully. He reached for the cup, and without much thought, took a slow sip. The maid became even more nervous. After drinking the whole cup, Lu Sheng set the cup down, nodding in approval, saying it's the best tea she has made, and her skill is improving. She bowed quickly, forcing a smile, saying she was glad that he liked it, however. Her voice was still a little shaky. Then she excused herself, saying she needed to use the restroom. As she walked away, her heart raced. Finally, the job's done, she thought, trying to calm her nerves. She knew exactly what she had slipped into Lu Sheng's tea, a deadly poison extracted from the genetic fluid of a level 9 beast. Even the strongest great grandmasters couldn't survive more than a minute after ingesting it, and while it might not kill a martial saint, it would leave them with permanent, incurable injuries. Just one more minute, and she'd finally be free. No more being a maid, no more military control, no more living this small, suffocating life. She could go somewhere new, start fresh, and live on with her unimaginable wealth. As the 60 seconds ticked by, she reached for the train door handle, ready to make her escape, but the moment her fingers touched it, a searing pain shot through her hand. She gasped, looking down in horror at her right hand. It was as if the door itself had burned her. Panic surged through her, and then she heard Lu Sheng's calm voice behind her. "Interesting, isn't it?" he said. He told her that this is called a psychic illusion, a little trick he picked up recently. She jerked her head up, and to her shock, Lu Sheng was standing right in front of her, not a scratch on him. And worse, she hadn't left the carriage at all. She had been standing there the entire time. "Master," she stammered, her voice trembling. She fell to her knees and said Lu Sheng's martial strength was unimaginable, and she had witnessed it firsthand today. Lu Sheng, still smiling, casually pulled out a small green vial, saying how he also learned something new. He also didn't expect to see a poison capable of killing a martial saint appear so soon. Saint's demise. That's quite the name. Wouldn't you agree? He asked. Lu Sheng already knew exactly what she had been planning, and now the poison was in his hands. The maid realized it was all over for her, so she begged Lu Sheng to end her life. However, what she didn't expect was that he simply points to a seat next to him and tells her to sit down first. She stammered, saying she didn't dare to, but whatever he wanted to know, she would tell the truth. Lu Sheng leaned back and asked if it was the Jidao martial school that told her to do this. She looked up in shock, couldn't believe that he already knew everything. Lu Sheng casually set the poison vial on the table between them, telling her that he figured it out half a month ago. However, he wanted to know what they promised her. The maid's heart sank as she realized Lu Sheng had been one step ahead the whole time. After hesitating for a moment, she finally blurted out, 5 billion. Lu Sheng chuckled, saying his life was surely worth quite a bit, and he's guessing this poison wasn't cheap either, right? He tossed the vial in his hand with a casual flick. The maid, still trembling, whispered, 1 drop costs about 500 million. This bottle has 15 drops. Instead of getting angry, he was quite impressed, thinking they really went all out on this, didn't they? Then, turning more serious, he asked her if there was anything else she wanted to say. Knowing there was no escape, the maid asked for one last mercy, not to be sent back to the military district, but for Lu Sheng to kill her instead. But Lu Sheng wasn't planning on either. He wasn't going to kill her with his own hands, and he's not sending her back either, but she will have to do one thing to make up for her mistake. With that, he activated his psychic powers. Sometime later, the high-speed train pulled into the station, and Lu Sheng stepped off. The train attendants waved him off with smiles and farewells. In the crowd, a cloaked figure clenched his teeth, glaring at Lu Sheng in disbelief. How is he still alive? The man turned to the maid standing beside him, thinking, what the hell happened, and why is he still breathing? She lowered her eyes and whispered, replied that she didn't have the right opportunity. Angrily, he hissed, asking her, "Then why did she call him here? Why didn't she stay close to him?" The maid met his gaze for a moment, then quietly replied, "This is the last thing she has to do." She then suddenly grabbed him and jumped onto the tracks. In an instant, a high-speed train barreled through. The crowd erupted in shock, realizing too late that someone had just thrown themselves in front of it. Lu Sheng, expressionless, glanced back for a moment. He knew exactly what had happened. He had planted a seed of psychic control in the maid's mind. He also figured that he hadn't really been focusing on psychic powers. But now, as an 8th-level psychic master, he realized that with the right use of these abilities, he could create illusions and even control the will of others. Using these powers, Lu Sheng could deceive a person's 5 senses, creating a world for them to experience whatever they wanted. The seed he planted in the maid wasn't just for control. It was a seed of atonement. Despite he had given her many chances already, she still ended up doing the wrong thing, and in the end, there had to be consequences. As her body was slowly carried away, Lu Sheng thought to himself that it seemed that he had become more hard-hearted, but he didn't regret it. If becoming more ruthless was the price for protecting the people around him, then so be it. His thoughts drifted back to Lian Su and the Jidao Martial School. Clenching his fists, he made up his mind. If they wanted to play dirty, then he'd play along and see who came out on top. Meanwhile, back at Lu Sheng's home, there was an unexpected guest today, none other than Governor Xia. Lu Sheng's dad warmly invited him in and even asked his daughter to brew tea for them. Governor Xia waved off the formalities, saying they were old friends. No need to be so stiff. He just heard that an important person from the military was coming to White Lake City today, and since he was heading out to greet them, he thought he'd swing by and visit. That's when he learned that Lu Sheng had coincidentally returned home today, and his face lit up. "Looks like I get to crash dinner again." Hearing Governor Xia compliment her cooking skills, Lu Sheng's mother beamed with pride. The 3 of them chatted away, while Lu Qing carefully served tea. While enjoying the tea, Governor Xia couldn't help but think of Lu Sheng. Although he didn't keep tabs on him daily, every time he did, it left him in shock. Whether it was single-handedly wiping out the nation's most dangerous criminals breaking records at the Divine Martial Tower, or the time he won the martial tournament, Lu Sheng was always surprising him. Governor Xia sipped his tea thoughtfully. Thinking that he wouldn't be surprised if Lu Sheng was already a grandmaster by now, he still couldn't believe that it's only been a bit more than a year, and that kid who was just starting out was already standing at his level. Well, clearly this dude is still using some 3G Wi-Fi, because those are some super outdated news. Anyway, thinking about the first time he came over to congratulate Lu Sheng for becoming the national top scorer, he thought of it being more of a routine investment. After all, building early connections with rising martial arts prodigies could bring huge returns down the road. Now, glancing at Chairman Xiao sitting beside him, thanks to his ties with Lu Sheng, Chairman Xiao was on his way to becoming the vice president of the Martial Arts Association in the capital. The dad, meanwhile, glanced at his watch and mumbled, "His son should be back from the military district by now. Why is he taking so long?" Governor Xia, surprised, turned to him and asked, "Wait, Lu Sheng joined the military?" He nodded while saying how Lu Sheng said school was boring, so he enlisted. Now he's talking about moving the whole family to the Eastern Military District in a few days. Honestly, the dad thought it was quite ridiculous. He barely lasted half a year in college before running off to something as dangerous as the military. Governor Xia chuckled, saying if the military's offering to move their whole family, Lu Sheng must be doing pretty well there. That boy's on the verge of soaring to new heights. Just as they were chatting, a loud honking sound came from outside. Governor Xia stood up immediately, guessing that it must be the car of the Major General from the Dongning province arriving. Lu Sheng's parents decided to join him at the door to greet the guest. When they reached the entrance, a red carpet had already been rolled out, and security guards lined both sides. The spectacle had already drawn curious neighbors, all craning their necks to see which people were visiting. Seeing the grandeur entrance, Governor Xia couldn't help but shake his head in admiration, thinking every time he sees old Qian's entourage, he gets a little jealous of the fanfare. Just then, a figure in a full military uniform stepped out of the car. Governor Xia hurried forward to greet him, but before he could say a word, the man looked at him nervously and told him to keep his voice down. Then, with great respect, the man turned toward the car and shouted, "Welcome, Top General!" Governor Xia was stunned. "Wait, Someone outranking old Kyan? And not just anyone, but an actual top general? He couldn't wrap his head around it, but there was no time to think. He hurried to line up with the others to give a proper welcome. The family, also swept up in the tense atmosphere, started to feel the pressure too. Only Lu Qing, who had been quietly watching the whole thing, suddenly gasped as she caught sight of someone stepping out of the SUV. Her eyes widened, saying, "Wait, isn't that my brother?"